Following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers. This is the TF Angie coming to you with what will hopefully be a quick and successful review. And today we're going to be taking a look at what unfortunately has become arguably the worst figure in the Studio Series Gamer Edition line so far. It is Deluxe Class Decepticon Barricade. So yes, Barricade. He's only the second figure that's been released in the Studio Series Gamer Edition line, and for everyone who's gotten a hold of this figure, they say that he's one of the worst deluxe class figures, probably one of the worst Transformers figures that's been released in the year 2023. And the fact that he's only the second figure of the Studio Series Gamer Edition line means that the Gamer Edition subline of Transformers Studio Series has been off to a rocky start, with Barricade being a lousy figure, and especially the Gamer Edition line, the Decepticon figures haven't been the greatest. The only other Decepticon figure apart from Barricade so far is Voyager class Megatron, which I reviewed a week ago. Oh, and as far as currently there's only five, as of this video's recording, there's only 5 Studio Series Gamer Edition figures that have been released, and ranking them from best to worst, Optimus Prime is the best, and then Bumblebee and Cliffjumper are the second and third best. Megatron is the second worst, and then Barricade here is at the bottom of the barrel. He's the worst of them all. That said, I am still excited and thrilled that I got this figure and added it to my Transformers collection because back when the Transformers Generations line was launched in 2010, part of the reason for launch, part of the sorry, I got my words mixed up there for a moment, but when the Generations line was launched, it was launched at the same time that the Transformers War for Cybertron video game released by High Moon Studios was released, and as a result, a handful of the figures released in the Generations line were based off of the War for Cybertron video game designs, and of those handful of War for Cybertron Transformers figures that were released in the Generations line back then, Barricade was not one of them. This right here, the Studio Series Deluxe Class figure, despite the bad reception it's gotten from Transformers fans and collectors, this is the first ever action figure based on Barricade's appearance in the War for Cybertron video game. So, at the very least, it is a unique figure in that regard, being the first ever iteration of Barricade from the video games. So you got some artwork here on the front of the box. You got Barricade based on his appearance in the video game. Got the same image here on this side of the box, and then the logo for the Studio Series Gamer Edition line are the 4 direction buttons on a video game controller: forwards, backwards, left, and right. Right, and then got the same image here on this side of the box. On the top of the box, you've got the Transformers War for Cybertron logo based on the video game logo that Hasbro came out with. And then again, of course, Barricade is the second figure to be released in the Gamer Edition line. Bumblebee was the first, Optimus Prime was the third, Megatron was the fourth, and of course, Cliffjumper is the fifth. Let me see if I got those mixed up. Yep, I did not. So yes, coming around here to the back of the box, you got Barricade in his robot mode and in his alternate mode of a Cybertronian car. Transforms back and forth between both modes in 15 steps, and he does come with one single laser gun weapon that, unfortunately, like all the Gamer Edition figures that have been released so far, the only way to actually have Barricade hold the laser gun is for you to pop off his right side arm and stick it on there, because that was the gimmick that the Transformers characters did in the War for Cybertron video game, was that they transformed one of their arms into their laser guns, and so to replicate that gimmick from the video games, Hasbro and Takara Tomy have, for all the Gamer Edition figures released so far, they designed it so that you can pop off the right side arm and attach a laser gun on the elbow and replace it, and you have quote unquote transformed the right side arm into the laser gun weapon. I personally do not like the pop the arm off and switch it with the laser gun gimmick for the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition figures. I would have preferred if they would have at least given the laser guns a 5mm handle, so you could actually have the character hold it in their fist if you desire, because the gimmick of switching out the arm for the laser guns, I've said this in every Transformers Studio Series figure I've reviewed so far, and if I haven't, I'm saying it right now with Barricade's review. In the long run, and it doesn't give much play value, and you put yourself at risk of losing the arm if you decide to put the laser gun on it instead. So I personally wouldn't be surprised if in about, say, 10, 15 years from now, the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition figures, used copies that have all of the accessory pieces gone, will start to appear on eBay, and so there'll be one-armed Transformers figures. So that's my main gripe with not just Barricade, but all the Gamer Edition figures, at least so far. And on the back of the box's one-sentence bio reads, Barricade assists in a mission to locate an ancient power called Dark Energon. So yeah, that was one of the sources of power the Decepticons were looking for in the War for Cybertron video game, was that supposedly there was Dark Energon that could enhance the Decepticons' strength and fighting abilities. Little did they know that Dark Energon was the Energon that flowed through Unicron's body. I have never owned or played the Transformers War for Cybertron video game. I've seen a couple of videos where people who did own the games did playthrough walkthroughs of the game, and I can honestly see one of the reasons why the War for Cybertron on its sequel game, Fall of Cybertron, have now been given figures in the Studio Series line, because even if you know what you're doing and you know all the points and objects to collect throughout the game and you know where to go with the game, even if when you know how the game is played and how to get from start to finish, it takes a player roughly 6 hours to complete the entire Transformers War for Cybertron video game. From the very start to the very end, that is how long the game lasts. And so, with a length of 6 hours, the actual War for Cybertron on video game is much longer than any of the live action Transformers movies that have been released so far. And whether or not they'd ever do a 6-hour Transformers movie, I highly doubt that would happen. But the point I'm getting at is that despite some flaws, I do wholeheartedly enjoy that we're getting figures based off the War for Cybertron video game in the Studio Series line. And on that note of having some flaws on some of these figures, Barricade's apparently the one that has the greatest flaw out of them all, and I'll show it off when we get him out of the box. So let's take him out and take a close look at Barricade in his robot mode. Alright, so here is Gamer Edition Barricade out of his box, transformed into his robot mode, and right off the bat, one thing I do not like is that there is absolutely no way of him holding his laser gun without popping the right side arm off and switching it out. There aren't even any 5mm ports I can see on here to hold it in place. I was kind of hoping that maybe they would have at least designed some type of peg to store it on somewhere else, but pretty much the only peg that Barricade has for his laser gun that's not his arm is this rectangular shaped port here on his back that lines up with this rectangular peg here on the side of the laser gun. So if you want to, you can have the laser gun stored on Barricade's back as if his backpack wasn't huge enough. Unfortunately, one of the flaws with Barricade is that right here, the entire back upper half section of his vehicle mode just transforms into a backpack that hangs off of him as back kibble, and what that huge backpack does is that it hinders the articulation, especially with his arms. So the Barricade's arms, they have the potential to spin forward and backwards 360 degrees, but the backpack gets in the way. His head is on a ball joint, but right out of the box it's very tough, so I'm not even going to twist it. He does have a waist swivel, but it gets in the way not only with the arms, but also with this right here. On the instruction sheets and on the photos on the back of his box, these wheels are supposed to be sitting up here on the upper half of next to Barricade's thighs, but if you want to, you can rotate them 180 degrees and you can have them in this configuration if you want. It does add more kibble to Barricade's lower legs, but at least it does free up space for the arms to move around just a tiny bit more. Legs can only go out that far at the hip. They can go back this far. They can only go forward this far due to the raised shin spikes that he had as they are in front of the hip joint. Right, swivel joint in the thigh, but these back panels hit each other, so the leg can only spin out that far from pointing forward, and then he doesn't really have any foot articulation. The foot can bend backwards at the ankle, but that's primarily due to transformation. And speaking of the feet, unfortunately, since I'm holding him up in the air, I can't really show it off, but this is the biggest flaw with Barricade. The way his feet have been designed, they're in the angle down ever so slightly. Even if you get Barricade to stand straight up, because of his large backpack and his knees, just said knees, his feet, the way they're shaped, it makes Barricade want to fall backwards, or even if you try and stand him up properly, the ankle joints are loose due to them being transformation joints, so Barricade will want to fall forward. I've seen where some people have put the altered Barricade's transformation by having the armor panels on the back of his legs sitting there behind the heel, I mean between the heel and the leg instead of behind it, and just to give his feet slightly more stability, but it doesn't really help that much. So unfortunately, Barricade literally doesn't have a leg to stand on, unfortunately. So, um, but if you can get past all that, he is a pretty decent figure, but due to the limited articulation, and of course his inability to stand up, of his two modes, robot mode is the weaker of Barricade's two modes. Where Barricade shines is in his vehicle mode of a Cybertronian car, and I've already seen more than one uh, Transformers fan say that if they decide to keep Gamer Edition Barricade, they're going to display him in his vehicle mode and have him just driving around, and they're going to ignore the robot mode entirely due to the terrible feet and lack of articulation that he has in robot mode. If the joints weren't hindered by his ibble and the sculpting detailing, then Barricade could be a pretty decent posing action figure in his own right. But as far as articulation goes, I'd say Barricade is on par with the articulated joints that the War for Cybertron figures released in the Generations line back in 2010 had. It was a decent amount of articulation for the types of joints that Hasbro and Takara Tomy were designing at the time, but compared to more recently released Transformers action figures that have been released in, say, the Legacy line, Barricade is very limited. He almost feels like a robot in disguise, IS 2001 or a car robot action figure in terms of how advanced his articulated joints are. But yes, that's pretty much all there's to say about Barricade. For a quick size comparison, reaching behind me to grab it. For a quick size comparison in robot mode, here's Barricade next to his wave mate, Gamer Edition Bumblebee. So, Barricade, one thing that he does have going for him is being a slightly larger size deluxe class Transformers figure, but the general attitude I've seen from other Transformers fans and collectors is that Barricade, despite being a fairly average sized deluxe class Transformers figure, the kibble, the terrible joints, and the horrible robot mode feet, those do not make up for him being a fairly large sized or tall deluxe class Transformers figure. So unfortunately, Barricade it has all these things working against him. So as far as how great of a figure he is, I'd say Barricade is pretty average. He is not the greatest Transformers figure to have in your collection, um, but as I said, if you're into the War for Cybertron video games and you're a fan of Barricade, he's still a pretty decent Transformers action figure to have. So I said a moment ago that, based on the overall attitude with Barricade, is that his vehicle mode is the better of his two modes. So let's hurry up and get him transformed into his alt mode and wrap up the review.